Greetings and salutations. This is Abdelhadi with The Bitter Truth, where we may not have all the answers, but we're going to ask an awful lot of questions. You can also become a bitter pill or a spoonful of sugar by visiting patreon.com/The Bitter Truth, where we can get a bunch of fabulous swag to make your life better. Today, I am really excited to have this guest on. He is a candidate for the Libertarian nomination for president. His name is Adam Kokesh. He is an Iraqi vet, or not that he's Iraqi. He is a vet of the Iraq War, to be clear. He was a U.S. Marine, honorably discharged. He won the Navy Commander Medal, a Combat Action Ribbon. I mean, he's done a bunch of stuff. He's also part of the Independent Ready Reserve. He's an author of Freedom.
Not anymore.
Oh, not anymore. All right, then. There you go. We'll talk about that. Okay. You got to work with me. This is all the shtick I get here. He's the host of Adam versus the Man podcast. And Adam Kokesh, how the fuck are you, man?
Hey, outstanding. Thanks for having me on, Abe. I appreciate it. It's been an exciting day already here in Phoenix. I'm actually coming to you from my friend Ernie Hancock's studios, the freedomphoenix.com studios, because we were at the lockdown protest in Phoenix today, marching on Governor Doug Ducey's office at the Capitol. And it's funny. I want to say, like, what was the actual title of the protest? Like, end the shutdown, end the lockdown, something like that. But I was surprisingly disappointed how much of a pro-Trump rally it was.
Oh, you surprised? These are anti-science people, man. I mean, I'm about to ask you, what the fuck are you like? Go French a kiss a guy with COVID and then get back to me. What is about the shutdown? I get it, because if it gets another month or two, I'm going to start getting conspiracy myself, because I don't trust the government anyway. But why are you getting out in a fucking protest to protest a shutdown when this pernicious shit has not even been tested? I'm in Texas. I'm in Austin, Texas. We're 50 for 50 in testing. They want to open the state. We don't even know who fucking has it or don't.
Right. Well, in terms of what is the real threat, it really doesn't warrant anything that the government is doing in response, except for what it in a limited sense can do to free up resources. It doesn't warrant the state of emergency. It doesn't warrant the restrictions. It doesn't warrant the stimulus or the bailout, which wouldn't be necessary without the shutdown of business.
Okay. Well, I mean, and we're going to get into a lot of your platform here too. But doesn't that kind of just belie the fact that capitalism is a failure? Every 4 to 7 years, the taxpayer has to bail it out. Capitalism is nothing but socialism for the rich and rugged individualism for the rest of us, as Martin Luther King said. And as evidenced again, 2 weeks, the banks get a bailout. The cruise lines get it.
Sure. What's your definition of capitalism?
Well, if there was a free market, the idea of capitalism is you run a business to the degree that you fail or you succeed. If you succeed, awesome. If you end up like Compaq Computers, which started in 1982 and then flamed out and got swallowed up by Hewlett-Packard, they didn't get a bailout. You run a business, it succeeds, right. Awesome. Otherwise, it's just we don't have capitalism in this country. We really don't.
Right. So how could you say that capitalism has failed if we don't have it here?
We bail it out every 4 to 7 years, even more frequently with the taxpayer dollar. That's not success.
But what you're saying is what we're bailing out is not capitalism anyway.
It's not.
I would agree with you.
That's right. My point. That's my point. It's not.
So what we have. So if what we have is not capitalism, you can't say that it's an example of capitalism failing. It's an example of crony capitalism failing.
Well, we seem to beat up on the communist. Well, we seem to. Okay. Well, fair enough. We seem to beat up on the communists quite a little bit. It was never even tried. Russia was a state-run capitalism, but we say communism failed. Well, I don't know if we've ever tried communism. I don't want to. But socialism in the way that Sweden does it, Denmark does it, or whoever, I'm tired of paying money to the great God business for them to selectively deliver my services, i.e. health insurance, right? So, I mean, that to me it's socialism for the rich. It's not. We've never tried capitalism. We've never had it.
Right.
So
yeah, I agree. That's why I want to get to that, because you gave a description. For me, when
Sure.
I use the term capitalism, I have a very precise definition that is generally the textbook definition, but understood with precision. And the textbook definition of capitalism is an economic system based on ownership of the means of production.
Right.
And what that has been confused as is in corporatism, is that the means of production are factories and machines and corporations, when the real means of production, the ultimate means of production, is the individual human mind, the individual human body, the individual independent human will. And if you don't own yourself, then we don't have capitalism. We don't have capitalism in a society where there's any kind of coercive government that exists at the expense of individual rights, that violates the basic premise of libertarianism, which is the non-aggression principle.
Sure. Well, I mean, don't we have that though? I mean, isn't it? I mean, we don't have. I don't think we have an assertive government. I think we have an assertive corporatocracy, as you just mentioned. Right. I mean,
but we definitely don't. We definitely don't have respect for the non-aggression principle today, because
no, we don't.
As an individual, if taxation is taken at the threat of gunpoint, ultimately, right? Taxation is done by force. The drug war is another great example where your self-ownership is denied. You don't have the right to decide what you put in your own body. And if you decide to run a business, you don't get to you don't get to operate that business without regulations being forced on you. And right now is the greatest example where, if you're a dude who works in a machine shop with three other dudes, you're shut down because the government says you're non-essential. And it's like, wait, I'm not even exposed at work. I can go in, and if we can do social distancing, and I have
right.
you have no risk whatsoever. I'm not putting anybody else at risk. Why are you making it illegal for me to go to work? And that's not true just about Corona and the emergency declarations and the shutdowns. That's true about so many other things in business regulation, where if you don't fill out forms, if you don't pay taxes, if you don't let a building inspector come and inspect your retail shop, then you get shut down. You don't get a business license.
You're right. Well, and let's this great segue into what we want. Your deal, because you're running for president of the United States. You're trying to get the nomination with the Libertarian Party.
Correct.
You've got some competition. You guys got a lot of libs running, and some of them are a little out there. Like Vermin Supreme, guys like that. And then it is what it is. But you got some cogent guys. I think Lincoln Chafee just dropped out, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Just a couple of weeks ago.
Okay. Well, so your main platform is the orderly dissolution of the federal government. You want to explain that a little bit?
Well, if you give me the ring of power, I'm going to throw it directly into the fire, and that's what this platform is based on. But really, it's the ultimate ethical platform, in the sense that you have to be some kind of psychopath to want to be president of the United States.
There's that.
To wield this power over other human beings that shouldn't exist. And
right.
Someone asked me, and this was at the Builder. I was at the Bilderberg conference in 2012. Don't worry, I was not there as an attendee. I was there as a journalist outside.
That's cool.
And it was my first chance to meet Alex Jones in person, and part of his crew. One of them was Jason Burmis, the original Info Warrior, and we were debating freedom versus statism outside Bilderberg. And at some point he says, "Oh yeah, what would you do if you were president?" I was like, "Quit, go home, and get a real job." Well, and then he goes, "No, really, what would you do if you were president?" I said, what would I do if I was president? Well, I would just get rid of three little parts of government: the judicial, the legislative, and the executive. And then I'd go home and get a real job. And he's like, "Okay, but really, what would you?" Well, I'd get rid of the federal government. I would at least localize it down one level if I could. If you said, "You're in charge of this level of government, Adam, what are you going to do with this unethical power?" Then, I'm going to get rid of it best I can. But people kept asking me questions. What would you do about this agency? What would you do about that agency? And I found out that, wow, I have a lot of really good answers. And it's not because I have them. It's just the simple idea of localization solves so many problems. First of all, it's the cure for polarization, right? If we don't have to be forced into this one-size-fits-all solution, we can see conservatives in conservative states and liberals in liberal states respecting each other instead of seeing each other as enemies. So we're going to localize the federal government in a peaceful, orderly, responsible bankruptcy process that leaves us with 50 independent states and up to 562 sovereign native nations as the first step in localization. And in this process, we get to take back a lot of what's been stolen from us by the federal government. So as the bankruptcy agent, I go in on day one, we declare the Constitution null and void. I resign the presidency to become custodian of the federal government, and the only power I have is that granted directly to me by the American people to carry out this specific bankruptcy process that, like I said, is peaceful, orderly, responsible, and provides for a transition.
How do you negate the Constitution?
Well, how did we get the Constitution in the first place?
A bunch of guys voted for it, but now we have it. So how do you get rid of it?
A bunch of guys vote to say, "Hey, now we don't want it."
Which bunch of guys?
No, the Constitution.
But hang on, that's a softball. Which bunch of guys? You can't just make a statement like negate the Constitution and go, okay, and I'm not going to say anything. How do you go about that?
First of all, the Constitution is illegal, right? The Constitution itself is unconstitutional. You're aware of this, right?
No, enlighten me.
Okay. Yeah. So before the current Constitution, the Constitution of the new independent states of America was the Articles of Confederation, and it required unanimous consent among the now independent colonies for any alterations. And when they had the Constitutional Convention, which was really like a counter-revolutionary coup.
The one in the Constitution in 1786, you mean?
Right. So it was already 10 years after the revolution in the Declaration.
Right.
And when people ask me, is your platform constitutional? I say, no, of course not. That's kind of the point. We are appealing to the higher authority known as the Declaration of Independence, which says we have not only a right but a duty to alter and abolish systems of government that no longer serve us. And for people who like the Constitution, you're welcome to have that enforced at the state level with people who consent to it. But it's un-American, by any definition, to force people into a system that they don't believe in, to deny people the right to declare their independence.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, let me ask you. So, because some states are less, productive than others. I mean, California is the seventh largest economy, for example. Arkansas is not, right? Why shouldn't we at least have a minimal form of federal government as a service?
So, because it's not a service, it's a racket.
No. The way it is, it's a racket. No. Don't make no mistake. This isn't Rachel Maddow here. I'm simply saying, why not have some sort? If you're going to come in and do what you're going to do, why not at least leave some? And I don't care about the fucking agencies. I'm just talking about just at a bare minimum. Sure. Keeping the trains running on time, the federal highways, like that.
The federal government doesn't run any trains.
I'm using that as an expression of thought. But
okay. What would you want to keep the federal government around to do? What do you think should be forced on this entire territory? What should people not be able to be independent from or have a voluntary system for?
As far as the federal government's concerned, well, I mean, I don't believe in war, right? At all.
So we got that taken care of. Good.
Yeah, it's a fucking racket. It's since we haven't had a war not based on the lie since at least the Spanish-American. We can go back further, but let's just be generous and start
Every
there.
war has been based on a lie. It's
I know. I'm just going.
So what would you want the federal government to keep doing?
I would like them to maintain, without any bullshit, some social services. I would like them to maintain unemployment. I'd like them to maintain.
Hold on. Don't you think those services would be better delivered at a community level or localized instead of at a centralized?
Well, I agree with you, but then where does the money come from? This is my question.
It always comes from the people.
Right, the people. But some states are less productive than others. For example, Indiana, Ohio, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. Those states have been decimated.
So you want people in an area where they have more money to be forced to give their money to people in an area where they have less money, as opposed to those communities taking care of themselves. And that's an interesting argument. But if you take it to its logical conclusion, then we need a global government to make things fair all across the world and force redistribution.
I'm not talking about across the world, and I'm not talking about, quote, taking people's money. If you're paying a tax,
taxation is theft, isn't it?
No, it's not the legal definition from Prud'homme.
Well, so
I don't believe that. If it's let me back up. Taxation is theft the way we do it now. Taxation is theft when we're paying for fucking 7 wars. Taxation is theft when we're embalming black and brown people, taking their shit for free and making them work for 15 cents a day and no bathroom breaks. I don't approve of that. So that's theft. But I don't care if someone's paying taxes in Mississippi or paying an equal amount of taxes in California, and I can still give some single mom working 3 jobs milking eggs for her kids and not ask questions about it and send some investigator to her fucking house and pick up her goddamn underwear with a fucking pen and accuse her of ripping off the government because she's buying lingerie. That to me doesn't make any kind of sense. So as far as when I say a minimal, to speak to your point, I don't know why we can't have at least a minimum degree of government. But then again, then you get into the same argument about agencies that you've been thrown at or had thrown at you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to force anybody or any community into a centralized system that doesn't represent them. And anytime you are forcing people to be a part of a bigger community, it's not really a community anymore. You're more like collective victims. I don't want anybody to be victimized. I want people to have the right to declare their independence and to only be a part of systems that they want to be a part of, whether they're local or global. But as it is today, what we know as government forces every American into the centralized system that is obviously holding us back in so many ways.
So what kind of, like say, for example, and I'm chewing ice, I'm sorry, and I'm drinking a scotch and soda. I'm working from home. So
I wish I was drinking a scotch.
It's either beer or scotch. I mean, I've been doing more edibles in the last month than I was doing all year.
I hear the shutdown's been good for weed sales. I got mine today here at a dispensary in Phoenix.
God bless your heart,
just
man.
This morning. Doing my part to support local businesses.
Yes.
The real heroes of the coronaphobia crisis are the bud tenders, bravely going to work at dispensaries with stoners.
Goddamn right. You're goddamn right. And someone should write a folk song about them, motherfuckers. But let me propose something to you, like because I want to get into the rest because you have some interesting, because you also want to get rid of the presidency, which and you're a young man. I hope you live a long life, but if you get elected, that's going to be a tough haul. But let me ask you, so how do you propose a state like Anderson?
Getting elected is the hard part. Right. Once I'm elected, abolishing the presidency is the easy part because we will have convinced the majority of the American people that it's what's necessary.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so how do you go to a state like California? I'm from LA. I've been here 5 years in Austin, Texas, and Texas is a pretty, prosperous state. We got a lot of industry here, a lot of shit here.
Right.
Texas, like states like New York, California, Texas, Massachusetts, okay, they fare better than, say, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Indiana, the states that got really hit hard by bullshit neoliberal policies of the last 40, 50 years, right? How do you begin rebuilding infrastructure in those states just for jobs, for example? Like, how do we bring jobs back? I mean, do you do what we did pre-1961, where you make manufacturing where it's a captured audience? You can't go manufacture shit overseas and then sell it at domestic prices like what we got to do since 1961, because before that it was illegal. So how do you bring jobs back to those areas? How do you get these guys self-sustaining to compete? Because we've decimated, say, Mississippi, we've decimated Indiana. How do you do that?
Well, I wouldn't say we,
Well, I wasn't. I know.
I wasn't there. Were you? Did you vote for those policies? Did
I
didn't. For taxes and regulations that kill jobs.
No, when I say,
no. I know. I'm not a grammar Nazi, but I am kind of a stickler for accuracy in language. The Dalai Lama was once asked, "What would you do if you were president? Or what's the first thing you do?" And he said, "I would start calling things by their proper names. War is murder. Politicians are criminals.
Okay.
Basic things like taxation is theft.
Okay.
And if so, to your question, what caused that to happen in the first place? What caused that economic imbalance where manufacturing got shipped overseas?
Right.
Is that manufacturing got less efficient here by comparison, and market forces corralled by government naturally sent those jobs overseas by saying, look, it's cheaper to do it there. We're going to do it there. Businesses that do it there outcompete businesses that do it here. Now, there's a natural balance, right? If it's way cheaper to make something next to the raw materials or next to the point of consumption where it's local and efficient, or if you're growing fruit, you don't and you want to sell fruit, in Antarctica, you don't try to set up a banana plantation in Antarctica. You grow your bananas somewhere it's warm and you ship them to Antarctica.
Right.
But if all of a sudden they made it illegal or extremely expensive to grow bananas anywhere except Antarctica, now you have to grow them there, and now you're growing somewhere where it's really inefficient. It's much more expensive, and now you have to ship them other places in the world. The effect that we have in the United States is that taxes and regulation have made it inefficient relative to other places in the world to make stuff.
Okay, but see, that's not completely true, though. We subsidize the shit out of these motherfuckers. And most of these places that ship jobs overseas got subsidies to build their plants in the places they built them in. And we didn't give them a time limit or a contract or any sort of quid pro quo. It should have been like, no, you can't move. We paid $150,000 a pop for those jobs in 1969 or whatever it was. You stay. And you can't bribe your way out of it. And you can't take our money and then move away because it's not.
Wait.
You're ignoring the Pullman strikes of the 1890s. Everyone ignores the fucking Pullman strikes of the 1890s. You can't expect people to make stuff and then lower their wages, but raise the price of the goods or services that they're expected to buy to keep the economy going. That's kind of my point here.
So Abe, you've accepted the most dangerous premise that I totally reject in your very statement there, where you said you cannot take our money and do XYZ with it. And it's like, wait. How about you can't take our money, period? Theft is wrong. You can't steal from the American people and then give it to your buddies in.
It's not like I didn't know. I mean, it's not like I didn't know when they tax you. It's not like I didn't know. Do I agree with where they spend the money? That to me, I think, at this point, maybe we'll split hairs because I think I don't mind paying taxes. I just don't like where it goes. And at least in France, you get an itemized receipt to the percentage point of where they spend the money, right down to fucking defense. We don't get that. We get FICO and Medicare and SSI and all that shit. 4 or 5 squares on a paycheck.
Guess what, Abe? Guess what? So if you only want your tax money to go exactly where you want, I have the perfect solution for you. It's amazing. It's going to blow your mind. I can't believe you didn't think of this. But if we get rid of all taxes, you can donate your money wherever you want. You can spend it on whatever you want. You can give it to the people you want, and none of it will go to what you don't want, because that's what happens when you let government decide how to spend your money.
So how are the states going to be any different? The states are going to tax.
Right. Now, this is the compromise of my platform. I'm not suggesting that this is the be-all, end-all solution. As I said, this is the first step towards localization, which is government at the community level, which is entirely voluntary.
Okay. So government at the community level, entirely voluntary, you mean no salaries, which I agree with.
I didn't say no salaries. What do you mean no salaries? I just think that there's no coercion. Voluntary means no force. Voluntary means I respect your rights. I respect basic ethics. Don't hit, don't steal, don't kill, not unless I'm a cop or a soldier or an IRS agent.
Okay. So how do you expect these communities when you mean voluntary, so the individual communities, a city, for example, will voluntarily pay tax? Or voluntarily chip into the fund, or how does that work?
Right. So like in where I live right now in Juniperwood Ranch, we have all private roads. And people who want to chip in for those private roads for development. And if you don't want to, you don't have to.
Okay. And so if people don't want to, how does it pay for itself then?
People who want to do pay for it. I chip in. I paid a little. I paid my share when I moved out there.
Okay. And you're
that reminds me I'm late. Yeah. That reminds me I'm late. I need to go get another,
don't say that shit on the air, man. Hey, don't say that.
No, but this is something I want to pay for. Like, I don't have a problem because it's voluntary. If they came to my door, nobody comes to doors out there because we're all extremely rural. We all have fences and gates and stuff. But if they put up a sign, and said, hey, please chip in now, your dues are up, and we'd like you to chip in for the roads, I would chip in.
Okay. Well, again, and not everybody does, as you and I know. Not human beings aren't exactly.
Right. And I don't want to force it on people who don't want to. I would never go and hire a government agent to go point guns.
Well, I don't want a government agent. This is where, and I want to get into. Okay, so Well, you kind of answered the question because you already said it was illegal. So I was going to ask you, because the presidency, isn't it supposed to be a steward of the Constitution? But, because the Constitution is a set of laws, the Declaration is basically an act of war. So in your mind, the president is not even a steward of the basic laws of this country.
No, the Declaration is not an act of war. It's literally a simple Declaration of Independence. To call it an act of war is not historically accurate or fair.
Independence from who,
because
Mars?
Right, but it was King George who said, "Well, I'm going to use violence to stop you from being independent." That was the act of war.
Right, and then the founding fathers, when they did the Declaration of Independence, was the Declaration of Independence from
Britain.
Britain. Okay, so it wasn't going to come easy. And they knew that, so it is basically a declaration of war. But isn't the presidency supposed to be a steward of this shit? I mean,
well, in the sense that you say that an act of war or a declaration of war is a recognition of a state, like under constitutional law, the idea of declaring war, the power to declare war, is supposed to rest with the Congress. And what that's supposed to be describing is an existing state of conflict. It's supposed to be a mechanism to ensure peace, to ensure that there are no aggressive wars fought.
Right.
So in that sense, when the colonies or colonists who signed the Declaration did it, in a sense, you could say they were declaring war in that they were recognizing that there was a state of war already happening, that there was a state of oppression where there was an oppressive king forcing his will on the colonists from across the ocean.
Sure.
And in a sense, we should be recognizing that is the current state as well, that we have a government based in Washington, D.C. that issues edicts from the Hill and enforces them on people hundreds of miles away. That's insane. That is a kind of war. And if what you're saying is that the Declaration was a declaration of war, then similarly, we need to acknowledge the war that we're in right now with Washington.
Sure. Well, that no question there. I mean, I say, excuse me, a war against the oligarchy, because the government is just basically a bunch of lapdogs to oligarchs. We don't have a functioning government. And when you mentioned earlier about polarization.
Oh, no, it functions. Yeah, it functions
as the oligarchy. Yeah. It functions the way they want it, which is
Let's use accurate agency here.
That's right. 100%. I'm not disagreeing with you at all. But okay, so but then again, this is the thing though, is that when you mentioned earlier the to get rid of the polarization, between the right, the so-called right, and the so-called left. I believe people believe what they believe. But for them to believe in these parties, this red and blue tribal shit, this is where they're wrong. Because except for guns, gays, and abortion, they're the same fucking guy. They're the same thing. Yeah. Nancy Pelosi.
Those are just those social wedge issues.
Yeah. It's cosmetic. I mean, it's important.
Yeah.
But compared to tariffs, compared to oil.
Politically.
Yeah. You know what I mean? And so they use that as wedge issues to polarize a guy in Kansas, with a guy in New York. Right, because one guy might be pro-choice, the other guy's pro-life. Okay, so you're gonna vote against your own interests based on one issue? I mean, guns are important, and they keep throwing that Second Amendment shit out there as though a party can get rid of the Second Amendment. That is a red herring. No Supreme Court is ever going to vote down the Second Amendment. No Congressperson is ever going to vote.
They already have. They've already asserted plenty of laws contrary to the Second Amendment.
Well, contrary, but they're not going to wipe it out. And I don't need an AR-15 or a hand grenade just because I want one. I mean, I got a Glock 9, I got a 38, and whatever. That's a taste issue. But my point is that
I'm not allowed to own guns.
You're a veteran.
No, that's not why. But I'm not allowed to own guns.
No, but I mean, you're a veteran.
Correct.
So why aren't you allowed?
What does that have to do with it?
Well, because you. I mean, I don't know. Do you have a crime or something that you did? I mean, why should?
Right, I'm a felon. I'm a felon for civil disobedience, and so my
that's bullshit.
Right is
okay. Now and that's selective, and that's bullshit. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Where again, that is a one-party oligarch system. This is kind of my point. When people buy into this shit, like the Biden people, any blue will do. Well, he's a fucking fascist.
Oh yeah.
But you're okay because he's nicer than the other fascist.
Yeah, right.
He's not the meat orange one. He's a fucking demented. Somebody actually told me this. Somebody actually told me this the other day. He's at least, I'm not kidding you. Well, at least he's in the single digits is what they said on the sexual assault
For
shit.
what?
Sexual assault.
That's the new.
Yeah.
That's the new
The
standard.
new rationalization. He's at least in the single. For his age,
Oh
he's
my
not.
God.
I'm like, dude, are you fucking high? This is the thing that I'm talking about when I say it's one oligarch party. As you said, works exactly as it is intended. So, okay, so you're leading a movement then. In the Libertarian Party, how many people agree with you, move with you, are there with you on this specific, let's disallow, because you're not sounding illogical, by the way, right? Somebody outside looking in, reading this would go, oh, he's crazy. I don't particularly think you're crazy. Why not dissolve the government? Why not find creative ways for the states to fund their own budgets, right?
Yeah.
Do you have traction here with people following you, even within the Libertarian Party?
Yeah, the absolutely. And philosophically, I am 100% on with the statement of principles of the party, the non-aggression principle, self-ownership.
Sure.
And I have found that 90+% of libertarians love this idea. The only reluctance is whether or not you can get the majority of the American people on board, or whether this is the right strategy for the Libertarian Party. And I think this is an amazing strategy for the Libertarian Party, because secession in a lot of states, in fact, most states, already polls higher than libertarians. So if the Libertarian Party wanted to be the everybody gets to secede party, then we would be way ahead of the game in terms of vote total. It would set the stage for a much bigger movement through the LP.
What kind of resistance are you getting back?
Oh, it's just people who think, there are a lot of libertarians who are great pillars in the party who have been involved for decades. And you know what it means to wake up, to pull back the veil, whether you become a libertarian or not, but to go, holy crap, most of society is dangerously wrong about most political issues. Holy crap. Why we are, that is a scary thing to realize before the internet exists. Sure. And for a lot of these guys, they woke up when they were very alone in waking up. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of them, and myself included, I've been a full-time activist for 13 years, although when I woke up, mostly the internet was developing, if not, sure. I didn't really have the full, now you wake up and you go, oh, wow, there are millions of libertarians all over the country. There's community everywhere. It's really easy to find people who assert ethics the same way that we do. And I think there's a certain self-consciousness. This is why Gary Johnson, and before him, Bob Barr, two, guys I personally, I have a lot of respect for and would call friends, but, they represented a very bad strategy for the Libertarian Party, because this strategy has been, let's show them how we can be a little bit different than the Republicans and Democrats. And it's like, no, we are fundamentally different. This is like libertarianism is not a political message. It's ethics applied to politics. And if we show people that's how we inspire people.
But that's a challenge with the libs, man. A lot of them, and I knew a ton of them in California. I mean, that's, California, every state's different. Like California libs are different than the Texas libertarians. They really are. Texas libertarians I find to be frustrated Republicans who, they don't even respect the libertarian charter. Right? Texas is a right to work state, for example. Texas is a right to work state, for example. And out here, and in the libertarian charter says that you have a right as an individual to negotiate your employment as an individual or through collective bargaining, right? Which would, indicate a union to get your wage, right? And out here, people are dyed in the wool with this right to work shit. And I'm sorry. I come from California. People that have collective bargaining in California, like cops out here, are treated like absolute shit in Texas. And Texas is supposed to love their cops. I know for a fact one of the counties that are out here that I work with for my day job hasn't had a raise in 13 fucking years because they got no juice. They go to the supervisors. Can we have a raise? No. Okay. Wait till next year. Right? So this is kind of where I'm saying it's like the challenge with a lot of the libertarians is that what I found, and the Greens did the same shit. they're frustrated Democrats who try to come in and carpetbag the fucking party for their own agenda. I see that with a lot of libertarians doing the same thing. Is that what you're saying about Gary Johnson and Bob Barr?
Yeah, there was another phenomena there, and a big part of it was that they were able to bring in people to fill empty seats in the delegate slots. And because we've brought so many people into the party over the last few years, that's not going to be a problem. But to your original assertion that libertarian, but when you say state,
hey, Adam, I'm sorry. The last 10 seconds, the thing froze. Can you say it again?
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Sure. So you're definitely right to point out that between Texas libertarians and California libertarians, there are differences in flavor, but it's more unified than you would think among the base of the movement in the respect for the non-aggression principle. And these state parties, when you say Texas libertarians or California libertarians, like, do you know how many people showed up at the California State Libertarian Convention?
No.
It was something like 80 delegates. Like, that's it. You know, we're talking about 80 people. You know, Texas it might be a bit more than that, but not some outsized number.
Yeah.
And I don't say this to insult or denigrate the party, but you know, the Republicans and Democrats have a lot more people, money, and control behind them. The Libertarian Party is kind of an open source party. You know, if you've got 20 conservatives and their friends together, you could have a conservative takeover of the Libertarian Party of California. If a bunch of libertarian socialists got together and got, you know, really organized, they could take over the Libertarian Party of Texas.
Right.
So it's relatively small compared to what your analysis would suggest there.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm just spitballing based on my own, you know, micro research from the people.
The other reason I make this point is that it's kind of an open source party. I have yet to hear a single complaint about the Libertarian Party that could not be solved by the person complaining showing up and doing something about it, even if he didn't like the presidential nominee, because Gary Johnson only won by 50 votes. One person for one of the other campaigns could have easily recruited 50 more people for Austin Peterson or John McAfee or even Darryl Perry, and Johnson would not have been the nominee.
So let me ask you a couple of things. I want to get to John McAfee here in a second. We got a little bit of time. What happened in Iraq that made you wake up? Because obviously you got in, you joined young, you joined the Marines young, and you thought you were doing something good. I assume.
Yep.
You thought you were doing something noble, right? Fighting for your country.
Yep.
What turned around?
Well, I wish I could say I was so open-minded that I was paid attention and learned all the lessons from Iraq while I was there, but it was a longer process. And
that's the way life
for me,
goes.
I have to. Yeah, I know. I don't want to mythologize waking up to, like, I saw this one dude and he looked at me like this, and then I was open-minded and I realized the truth of the world. No, like,
your eyes met before you shot him, and then you knew.
Yeah, right. Yeah, my parents were pretty anti-authoritarian,
right?
And my dad was vaguely conservative. My mom was vaguely liberal. They're both a lot more libertarian now, and they raised me to question authority. But they also got divorced when I was 10, so I was just messed up enough to join the Marine Corps. By the way, there is a statistical trend that children who grow up with bad households are more likely to join the military, and especially without fathers, to join the Marines.
Oh shit!
So there is a real. I'm not just making some offhanded remark.
I get it. Yeah.
Basis to that. And when I joined, I just wanted to have my life on the line for something I believed in. I kind of wanted to be independent of my parents as much as anything. And I was a libertarian in name only. And this is why I really have a problem with people misrepresenting libertarianism by nominating someone like Gary Johnson, who's going to say, well, I'm socially liberal, I'm fiscally conservative. And it's like, yeah, so you're the best of both worlds. You mean both crappy worlds that most people don't want anything to do with anyway? Like, no, people are looking for something fundamentally different. And the Libertarian Party, or the libertarian message of the non-aggression principle, of universal nonviolence, of self-ownership, of ethics, of free markets and capitalism, these are really deep ethical principles. And if I would have gotten them, I never would have enlisted in the first place.
Sure.
But when I volunteered to go to Iraq, and I was in Fallujah in 2004, and I got, a taste of combat. It wasn't like, I was in Fallujah. I was there for the first battle of Fallujah, the siege, not the second battle, which was the big one, the sweep through the city.
Sure.
And it was a big part of it was being in civil affairs, because I was actually against the war before the war, but I volunteered to go to Iraq in civil affairs because I thought that was responsible foreign policy, that was somehow cleaning up our mess and doing the right thing.
Sure.
And then when we got there, and I really realized that what we were doing was imposing martial law on the country. That was, and I can't even say it was right away. Like, I got home and I was dealing with PTSD, and it took me a while to really get my bearing. Even for a while, I didn't even want, like, I was majoring in politics, and I switched to psychology because I was kind of like, I was scared, like I didn't want to have anything to do with it at that point, and got back into it later, but then it was after I got out, I joined Iraq Veterans Against the War.
Right.
And I was like, well, surrounded by all these lefties, it was like, well, I'm a libertarian. I know I'm right about everything. I just have to prove it. So, yeah, right. You should laugh at that. But
I'm the same. I'm an asshole. I mean, but continue. I'm sorry.
But no. But it was that determination, because I knew, and I really wasn't right about everything at that point in the way that I am much more right about things now. But that was the motivation, is that I had these conversations with people who I knew weren't bullshitting me. They were well-intentioned. I was getting arrested with them at protests. So I knew that they were arguing from a well-intentioned perspective. And if we're arguing education and they're saying government should run education, I'm saying, no, we shouldn't have any violence in the education system. Well, back then I wouldn't have been able to articulate that way. Back then I would have said free market for education. And that doesn't really account for, all the other voluntary community-based possibilities that are appropriate in a libertarian society. And so I was motivated to get to the bottom of the rabbit hole, to develop a more consistent worldview. And I was able to do that through their conversations and the research that they motivated.
Right.
And then for me, I should say the bottom of the rabbit hole was Ethics of Liberty by Murray Rothbard. Okay.
Very cool. Well, so you made a joke about it, but it's true. Like epiphanies, they're rare. They happen, but they're rare. I mean,
and when they do happen, they're usually the product of a longer process.
Right. It's a death by 1,000 paper cuts. Right. So, like, how long were you back?
The death of bad ideas.
The death of bad ideas.
The death of statism. And that's what it is. It's the death of a worldview. You have a worldview based on the violence of government,
but it takes
of course of authority.
But it takes 1,000 paper cuts, not just because you shot an Iraqi once or something like that, and then you realize at that moment that's a movie. That's Hollywood bullshit. My question is like,
hold on, let me stop you for a second there, Abe, because that's a really good. I want to really like zero in on this for a second. A lot of libertarians get discouraged because we have gone through this conversion process that we're able to look back and go, it was a conversion, and then I got it, and yes, ethics, that's it, I get it now. And really, it is more like death by 1,000 paper cuts, that we have this model in our head, this demon of statism, this monster called government is good and righteous, and you have to realize that you have to kill this monster that you don't even know is a monster, but you go, oh yeah, I got to cut that part out, that's wrong. Oh yeah, I got to cut that part out, that's wrong. Maybe it's not death by 1,000 paper cuts, but it's like, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, right?
Yeah.
It's like, how do you slay this demon that is a bad worldview? It's one idea at a time, sometimes chipping away.
Well, like when you were back, and I don't want to spend a whole ton of time on this because I want to move on to John McAfee a little bit, but when you were, you got back, and and like I said, you went there, and then you volunteered for the civil deal, Hearts and Minds, basically.
Civil affairs,
to basically clean up our shit. because it
Yeah,
was
well, we used to joke 2 in the heart and 1 in the mind.
right.
We were bad.
Well, I mean, that's
Yeah,
the
it
thing,
was
though.
bad.
It's like we're an imperialist bunch of fuckers, and have been from the
Not
get go.
we.
I know I
Not
didn't.
we.
You're right. But I live here. And so there you go. But no, but this country, this government, this nation has been set up that way for a long fucking time. At one point, and in the middle of your civil affairs duty, and then you get back home, and then you're figuring some shit out. At what point did it happen? Did you, or was there several points that you just said, God damn it, war is a racket, as Smedley Butler wrote? I've read that book pretty much every other year, the last 30 fucking years. How fast did it happen that you went, what the fuck were we doing in Iraq? What was I doing in Iraq? I got had. They fucking lied to me. You know what I used to do? I'm 56.
Yeah.
I'm 56 years old. I'm older than you. Let me tell you what I used to do till about 7, 8 years ago. If I was at the airport and I saw a kid in fatigues getting ready to get on a plane with his fucking bag, right? I'd buy him a beer and I'd thank him for his service. And then it hit me like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
It hit me like even though I knew the war was bullshit, but I'm like, well, that kid thinks he's doing the right thing. And then I thought, you know what? I'm encouraging his fucking behavior. I'm participating in the fetishization. The fetish I can't say that word. Making a fetish out of the military. This whole we don't tell them that they're going to come back broken, maimed, dead, or insane. We don't tell them that. We give them this John Wayne Red Dawn as a documentary bullshit, right? And then they come home, and the very thing that they fought for fucks them in the ass, right? The VA deserts them. Family deserts them. They got PTSD up the ass, or shell shock, as they used to call it after World War I, Civil War, which is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've been on the other end of a gun a couple of times. Fucking freaky enough. Had a couple of fist fights. Can imagine shooting somebody or being shot at, right? It's like, so at what point did you come home and go, fuck, man, I've been had. We've been had. These guys have been had.
Yeah, I'm pretty slow, or at least I had a lot of Kool-Aid I had to puke out of my system first because it did take a while. Like I got home and I was just really keenly watching the second Battle of Fallujah unfold on the front page of the New York Times. That was how I got my news back then. And then I volunteered to go back, actually.
Oh, fuck,
man. And I got in trouble for bringing a pistol back the first time. And so, excuse me, I ended up getting in trouble and just sitting at Camp Pendleton for a year. Excuse me. And then it was really, I'm kind of embarrassed to admit this because people look at me now as this really open-minded guy. And I think I've trained myself to be more open-minded. I think the more, you can embrace mental flexibility, intellectual flexibility, the better off you are.
Sure.
And I've gotten to that point now, but people assume I always was that. It's like, no, I was a Kool-Aid drinker. And so I volunteered to go back, and it was only because I got in trouble and was pissed off. Like I went from sergeant to corporal. I got busted down the day after I got my Navy Commendation Medal, and when I got out of the Marines, I was pissed off. And then I saw the website for Iraq Veterans Against the War, and I was like, yeah, that's me. Got to have my name on that list, and just kind of ended up running away with the circus, getting swept up in the momentum of it. And I really loved it. And it was a really righteous time. And at first I was like, I didn't even understand how bad it was. It took me, like a few months at least of just immersion in the anti-war movement to really realize how bad we had gotten. So like that first 6 months, maybe a year in the anti-war movement, when I was primarily active with Iraq Veterans Against the War full time.
Sure.
I went through a lot of self-education. Sure,
man. No, hey, listen, and I came up religious, right? I mean, so I get it. Like, anyone that's questioning you, or sometimes I get bitched at about my religious background because I've been out of the church 30 odd years now. And the way I say it is I got early release for time served. And people are always sort of like, well, you weren't really. I guess I wasn't. Maybe because the shit doesn't really exist. That's just my opinion. But the thing I always tell people is you should see the movie Quadrophenia, which is based on the album by The Who, or at least listen to the album, because it's not about mods and rockers. It's about a guy who truly believed until the system let him down. And then he had to wake up and realize he was it. There is no system. There is no plan. God's not going to give you a pony, you know, and John
but Vermin Supreme will.
Yeah, Vermin Supreme's going to give you a fucking pony. Great segue. Bravo. You know, and Red Dawn's
you want to talk about John McAfee, right?
Yeah, we got about 10 minutes left. I want to get into John McAfee. You're going to come back on, though. I fucking love you, man. So,
sure, let's do it.
But seriously, so let's talk about John McAfee a little bit. So if you get the nomination, he's going to be your VP, right?
Well, that is pending approval by the Libertarian Party. We are sort of there's really no such thing formally as running mates in the Libertarian Party.
Okay.
Because the nominee for president and vice president are selected independently. Okay. So a part of it depends on, if John is going to be able to be there in person and, what he says he can do as the vice presidential nominee of the party. But yeah, right now, he's my favorite. I would love to have him as a running mate. Right now, especially, you can campaign remotely and be effective. He is incredibly effective online and on social media. He has more Twitter followers than I think every other Libertarian presidential candidate, myself included, and all the VP candidates combined with over 1 million something. Whereas, I think I have the second most Twitter followers with 55,000. And then, Vermin Supreme's got 50,000. Everybody else is just way down the list. So wow. John McAfee blows everybody else out of the water. But also in proposing this to the American people, I can say, look, I'm not running to be president. I'm running to be the bankruptcy agent of the federal government. I'm going to have, a tiny fraction, 1 or 2% of the power or discretion that the president has. And even then, it's really just to carry out this exact process. People can say, well, you're not, mature enough to be president, or you don't have the corporate experience. Well, yeah, okay, fine. I don't. But guess what? John McAfee does. Or John McAfee has the corporate experience. He has the experience in so many other fields that I lack. He has the proven success in software and cybersecurity that is in so many ways over my head. And in that sense, if the American people entrust me to dissolve the federal government and say, all right, Adam, take it down, I would be so honored to have John McAfee helping me out in that effort.
Well, so I mean, I've read some allegations and shit like that back and forth. Like he's living on some island like Howard Hughes somewhere. Is he in a mood or in a place where he wants to even bother with this, or is this something that you're kind of foisting on him?
Oh no, he was in Bolivia and then came back to the United States after being accused of murder there, and then came to have some problems with the IRS, left the United States, and is now in a sort of legal limbo kind of exile, where if he came back, he might be arrested for the IRS charges. But obviously, he's elected as vice president of the United States, and federal law is unenforced on day one.
That's right. That problem. But you're going to fuck that in the ass because as soon as you come in, it's over.
That's my point. No, so as soon as you come in, we all. This is really the best, the moral crux of this platform. The ultimate ethical part of this is that all federal laws stop being enforced on day one. The federal government becomes a custodial institution in bankruptcy. That's why I like to call myself then the custodian of the federal government, which is a very appropriate title.
So then everything would just go revert right back to the states according to what you want to get done.
As of day one, January 21st, 2021, I signed that executive order, and with that, states become sovereign, and the federal government is a vestigial corporate organization going through a bankruptcy process.
Okay, so listen, in the few minutes wrapping up, let me ask you a quick question. So, let's just say it bucks down to McAfee, and then they try to 25th Amendment both of your asses, and then it bucks down to the Speaker of the House, who's technically the third in line to be president. How do you handle that?
So this gets back to the question, is your platform constitutional? And ultimately, I said, of course not. And to your question, if they take us out, or if something happens to me or John, it doesn't matter, because the American people will have clearly asserted that this is the will of the people, that we're not putting up with this crap from Washington any longer. And we are not even going to let the super class, keep their toys around anymore. We're not going to let anybody wear the ring of power. We are going to demand that the ring be thrown into the fire. So I say this sometimes when people say, how can we trust you, Adam? Well, let's say day one, I get in there and they bring me the stack of papers that is the executive order to dissolve the federal government. And I say, yeah, never mind. Why don't you bring me the dictator for life papers instead? You think I'm going to get away with that? You think the American people are going to just go, okay, I guess he changed his mind? No, because we as a country decided that. And I've said this before. If I do that, shoot me. Now, hopefully you don't have to shoot me. You can just put me in a straitjacket until I come to my senses. Someone else can come in. John McAfee, he'll sign it. And if he doesn't do it, same thing. Don't let anybody put on the ring of power ever again. That's what we are asserting by voting for this platform.
Nice, man. Nice. Well, hey, listen, I know your time is tight, and you know you got other things on your agenda, man. I'm going to have to start wrapping it up. You've been very generous, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Abe. And I appreciate the flexibility. You know, I told you I was going to be late today, and you delayed so graciously, but we didn't even get to talk much about the protest in Phoenix today, and all of the problems with the shutdown and where we're going with this, because it is a really exciting time right now, and I just want to encourage everybody.
Throw it in. We'll say something. I'm on your time. So I went there wearing the Free Hugs T-shirt, and I got a lot of people came up and gave me free hugs, and or gave me a hug, and there is a weird disconnect right now between what's the reality on the ground of servers and bartenders and small business owners out of work and suffering, and all of that stuff being censored on social media and in the mainstream media, and people fear-mongering about this virus, which is a real but relatively minor global health threat, and it's one that we would deal with. The comparison to the flu is a really good one. And you can't yes, you can compare it. It's the closest thing we have to it. Obviously, there are differences. We're not saying it's just like the flu, but the best understanding is it's a virus. It behaves a lot like the flu. It might be 3 times as deadly. It's not 10 times as deadly. It's not 100 times as deadly. Those were all bullshit exaggerations. How much do you freak out about the flu when we have a bad flu season? Do you even notice when we have a bad flu season and deaths surge from 40,000 to 60? No, you don't even notice. So however much you freak out about the flu, you take that and you multiply it times 3, and that's how much we should be freaking out. So 0 times 3 is still 0. And none of this is justification for what the government is doing. I think it's really important for people to stand up however they can and assert we are not afraid. Even if they say, look, I'm going to go out and I'm going to stay 6 feet away from people and I'm going to wear a mask and gloves. Don't be afraid to go out and live your life and enjoy your life. Even if you think, hey, strict social distancing is necessary, then do it. But go out and do not be afraid, especially right now, because fear is how they take advantage of us. All right, man. Hey, listen, the virus in and of itself would be a whole another hour, but I definitely appreciate your time. And like I said, I know you got a tight schedule, so we're kind of at the end of the hour here. But
thank you so much, Abe.
Thank you. Good luck with everything. And folks, again, your link for what's your link for president? I'm going to put that on.
Yeah. Yeah, my main website is thefreedomline.com. You can find kokeshforpresident.com. You can find thegardenofreedom.com, bigigloo.biz, my geodesics company. You can get my book for free. All my social media from thefreedomline.com. You can email me, adam@thefreedomline.com. And if you enjoyed this interview, please share this show, share this episode, and support independent media. We don't get corporate sponsorship. I know what Abe has to do to produce and distribute a show like this. We need active and engaged audiences to realize the power of this technology. So thank you for being a part of this.
Thanks, brother. Hey, listen, as we wrap up, guys, again, patreon.com/thebittertruth. You can visit that.
There you go.
Listen to us on iTunes, Spotify, all the usual suspects for free, but we appreciate the support. And as always, if this shit makes you uncomfortable, it's supposed to. Sleep tight.